Hey everyone, welcome back to Anvil of Doom Miniatures. My name is Deets and happy Halloween. Now I would argue that Warhammer Fantasy has some of the most iconic spooky miniatures out of any game, and if you collected a vampire counts or undead army, you're pretty much celebrating Halloween year round. This army's aesthetic was a classic take on vampires, zombies, skeletons, and pretty much anything that was spooky in nature. The earliest sculpts look like what you would have seen in a 90s cartoon or even on a box of cereal or something like that. And that's what I love about the old vampire counts armies or the undead armies. They truly were a product of their time, and that's what makes them really fun to collect as well. This army has really grown on me since I got back into Warhammer Fantasy, and as it's Halloween, I thought let's celebrate the undead dynasty of the old world, and I'll go through my top 5 vampire counts miniatures. It's an FYI, this is my opinion, kind of my preferences. I'm not really bringing any of the gaming side into this. It's more of like the aesthetics of the miniatures, what I like to paint as a painter. But let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong, and let me know what your guys' top 5 would be. PS, before we start, I just want to clarify that the beautiful Nagash, that beautiful classic miniature, is beyond number 1. So that guy kind of sits off in his own category to the side because we kind of owe him for everything. He's a great miniature, but he's not in this top 5, he's beyond. But anyway, that's enough chewing the corpse, let's get straight into it. Around the tail end of Warhammer Fantasy, you can kind of see the sculpts increasing in quality and becoming a little bit more out there. They started to have a bit more movement in their designs, and the lords and champions started to become a bit more heroic with their poses, and it kind of set them apart. Now, Manfred von Carstein, who has like 10 nicknames, had a pretty massive glow up from his Count Chocula looking origin to this Vin Diesel spiked looking guy. Anyway, I think the newer sculpt looks a bit more formidable. I love the way his kind of cape wraps around and he's got his like scythe staff there. It really does give him a bit of movement, and this character is meant to be a bit more magical in nature, and this pose really does make him look that way. Also, I love the way his nightmarish mount has its mouth open. It looks like it's like wailing or screaming, and if you look closely at the hoofs, they've got like a bat-like or a bat wing type of hoof style, which I think is really cool as well. Now, looking at this miniature as a painter, it's probably going to be a nightmare to paint, and it's definitely one of those miniatures that you're going to paint over 2 weeks and really put that effort in. Compiling this list wasn't easy for me. I went through so many miniatures and kind of back and forth between a lot of them, but I couldn't go past this classic miniature. Krell is one of the original 9 Lords of Nagash, and he's also a White King. And this miniature just screams Oldhammer to me. When I look at this miniature, I feel like an electric guitar's going off in my head. Just the way he's posed, he looks like he's very rock and roll. Huge horns on his helmet and the oversized axe is what Oldhammer's all about, and I can guarantee you this miniature would be a lot of fun to paint. It is basic enough for beginners, but if you really wanted to put some effort in and go paint a banner, you could do that as well. I think if you want to give Olden Demon a crack next year, this miniature would be great for the competition. Just the pose and everything about it, it's definitely up there just with the aesthetics of Oldhammer. So if you want to enter, try track this one down. Also, a fun fact about Krell is back in his human days before he turned into bones, he was a Chaos Warrior and he fought for Khorne. He even fought against our boy Sigma, and I think he ran away from that fight, I'm not too sure. But anyway, he has a large history in the old world and he's bumped into a few characters here and there. Krell also has a more modern sculpt, which looks pretty cool to me, but I think the original classic miniature is the true winner here, and that's why it's my number 4. Time for number 3, and I couldn't go past Heinrich Kemmler, the Lich Master himself. Now, there are a lot of Necromancer miniatures in the Vampire Counts and Undead range. I really recommend you go take a look at them. There's so many awesome sculpts out there, but this guy for me is the pinnacle of what a Necromancer looks like. Now, there are 2 versions of this Kemmler miniature. There's a classic sculpt and there's the more recent one. I am a bit more of a fan of the more recent one. It's just like they cranked him up to 11. He really is the opposite to a wizard in every single way, from his skin-like robes he's got on, to his bat-like staff, to all the crazy amount of skulls he has on him. He just screams Necromancer. I really don't think there's a miniature out there that looks more menacing than Heinrich Kemmler. Maybe some of the Goblin sculpts or something like that, but we're not talking about those guys. We're talking about vampire counts, so they don't really count. Now, Heinrich Kemmler got up to a few shenanigans like any good Necromancer would. He traveled to Nekihara. He also had a few run-ins with the Bretonnians, but I really only scratched the surface on his lore, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it a bit more eventually. But anyway, this sculpt is the pinnacle of what a Necromancer looks like to me, and that's why it's number 3 on my list. Now, you're going to have to forgive me for my number 2 because they're not a single miniature, but kind of like a crypt full of them, and it is the classic von Carstein range. When I think vampires of the old world, I think the classic von Carsteins. I know I've kept babbling on about the vampire aesthetic, but these guys have it in spades. I actually painted one of these guys up for Halloween last year and it was a lot of fun. If you give him the pale face with the black and red robes, you get a really, really iconic vampire mini. Now, if you held a wooden stake to my heart and made me choose a miniature out of this whole bunch, I'd probably have to choose the Mordheim version of it. Now, I know he's made at a different time, but he looks so similar, I had to pull them all together. I really do love this miniature. The way his kind of cape is flowing behind him and he's like charging at some poor Mordheim peasant. I really do love it, and I think it'd be a lot of fun to paint. Now, the Von Kaistans are obviously the big dogs of Sylvania and kind of their rulers, and they've got so much lore and it kind of goes forever that I don't really want to talk about it here, but that's what also kind of made me bump them up into the number 2 spot, so I'm a little bit biased there, so sorry about that. But as time does go on and miniature sculpts kind of get more crazy and out there and more intricate, it's nice to kind of recognize that what makes the vampires in the old world vampires is kind of the way they look. In the old world, they're kind of meant to blend into society, manipulate governments, build covens, assassinate and hunt, and they really couldn't do that if they looked kind of monster-like and too out there, so it's nice to have them more human-like. Well, that's what I think anyway. But if you ever just wanted to paint a typical classic vampire, I highly recommend snapping one of these guys up. You can find them for secondhand on eBay from time to time, and yeah, definitely slap some paint on them because they're a lot of fun. It's now time for my number 1, but before we get into that, make sure you hit the like button if you're enjoying the video, and also the subscribe button to stay up to date with all my videos. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get back into it. Okay, so as a kid, there was one miniature that I was kind of in awe of, and I remember looking at it on the pages of White Dwarf, and also I remember kind of jumping online and looking at the old Games Workshop website back in the day. I think it was the late 90s or early 2000s, and I just kind of look at this miniature all the time. It was one I just absolutely adored. And to me, you can't get any more crazy or horrifying or even beautiful than this Zacharias the Ever Living on his zombie dragon. I don't even know where to start with this guy. He's kind of like looking like he's half dead, riding a zombie dragon, and he's got a little familiar hanging off the side. It's absolutely perfect. I really, really love this miniature, and I was lucky enough to kind of pick this one up a few months ago. Unfortunately, I was missing his claw, so I really haven't got around to painting him yet, but I think I'm just going to get some green stuff eventually and just kind of make his claw, and maybe I'll make that into a video. We'll see how we go. But yeah, this miniature is absolutely stunning and beautiful. Now, this guy studied under my boy Dieter Helsnitch for quite some time. He had a highly abusive relationship with Melkor, and he's the one who turned him into this vampire looking thing. It's really cool how he kind of grew into what he is in this miniature as well. As I said, I really love this miniature. It's definitely peak vampire counts for me, and as a collector as well, I'm so happy to have it because it is a real beaut. And that's pretty much it. That's my top 5. I also want to give an honorable shout out to a few other miniatures which you can see here, and especially my boy Dieter Helsnitch, because it's Dieter Helsnitch and he's such a great miniature with such a great story as well. There's so many miniatures to choose from. Go take a look at the Vampire Counts range online. As it's Halloween, we can all celebrate it, and it's really unfortunate that, you know, the old world really isn't bringing them back, but maybe they will one day, which would be really cool because I think these old sculpts, you know, really do deserve to come back, and I would love for Games Workshop to make them because I'd buy pretty much all of them as well. But yeah, that's my top 5 miniatures from the Vampire Counts range. I'd love to know what your top 5 are, or even what your number 1 is, so let me know down in the comments below. And last up, I want to say a massive thank you to all my Patreon members. You guys are a bunch of legends. I really appreciate all the support week in and week out. I really couldn't do it without you guys. And if you want to join the Patreon, the link is in the bio, and I look forward to seeing you in the Discord. And that's pretty much it for me. Happy Halloween. It's my birthday, and I'm going to get the hell out of here and have a beer. Anyway, I'll see you all next time. Cheers.